There's always one thing after another, whether it's GFC or financial crisis or pandemics. There's always something, I feel like. So you just have to adapt and get on with it, right?
It's big enough to actually be quite strong, but still small enough where you can make a difference. One of the real selling points is that it is a global industry and the skills that you can learn are transferable around the world. I'd encourage any young people that do come into the industry to try and diversify their experiences and skills as much as possible. The next decade, processes will start radically changing. Government agencies will be risk assessing in different ways, and industry will be processing freight in different ways. I think it's those that can embrace the change will survive and prosper.
Welcome to Forward Thinking. I'm Sam Smeaton, director and co-founder at LogiHire. Now, Forward Thinking, I guess, was designed to dig into all things freight forwarding, transport, and logistics, and just have conversations with people that are kind of leading the industry across Australia. And today I'm joined by the one and only Paul Zalai, co-founder of Freight Trade Alliance. You are Australia's leading supply chain body, and you guys represent importers, exporters, brokers, freight forwarders, and other service providers and industry groups. And Paul also leads the Australian Peak Shippers Association, which I understand is representing Australia's cargo owners and shippers within global logistics. So you've got a bit on your plate. Paul, thanks for joining me. Great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And I thought I'd better dress up for the occasion. I thought I needed to look a bit more hip because I haven't got a sleeve tattoo like you, so I thought I needed to at least look a bit more with it. So thanks for having me.
No worries. It's a great pick. I'd be surprised if our listeners and audience haven't heard of you and FTA, but for the 1% that haven't, would you mind just maybe giving a bit of an overview on you and kind of how FTA came to be?
Okay, I'll give you the quick version. I won't stretch this one out, but look, very short term. I 40 odd years in the industry. I worked in freight forwarding companies in Sydney back in the early 80s. Did my customs broker studies back then at Sydney TAFE, where I met a lot of friends who are still in the industry today. Had the first of many bright ideas back in 1986. Joined Australian Customs, thought I'd do that for a year or two, but ended up enjoying it, doing it for 13 years. Took a liking to the now legacy systems and was running the support services there for the government agency. Then in 1999, I left Customs to become the ICS user representative. That was a contracted role back to government to represent industry on the new systems using this wonderful new phenomenon called the internet. So we moved to more modern systems. After that time, I worked in industry association roles. And then I had another bright idea talking with my wife, Caroline, 13 years ago. We said, well, why don't we set up an industry body that is more inclusive of the wider logistics group, like what you described earlier, and wind the clock forward 13 years. We've grown considerably. We're representing about 530 corporate members across all those different sectors that you mentioned. So it's been quite a journey. Seen a lot of things in that time. Lost a bit of hair in that time. Yeah, I've had a bit of fun as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, so you co-founded FTA with your wife, Caroline. I mean, not too many people, I think, with our listeners can probably relate, although I can. And I know we kind of share that little bond there. But what's it like? How's it working with your wife?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, and I'm sure she'll listen to this, so I've got to be very careful what I say. But look, we've been married 37 years, which has been an absolute fantastic relationship. And of that, the last 13 were as business partners. And as I said at the care factor function, I think those 13 years count for double. So in effect, we've been married 50 years. But look, I think it's been fantastic. It hasn't been with, it has its challenges because the evolution from being life partner to business partner takes some adjustment. But at the same time, I don't think FTA would have succeeded if we weren't both in the business, because we had to give blood, sweat and tears and countless long hours to get it off the ground and make it run and to grow. I think there would have been resentment if there was just one of us in the business. I think that we were both in it actually gave us that opportunity to be fully engrossed in it and actually make it what it is today.
Yeah, that's so true. I think when you're both in it, you can kind of, you obviously share those highs and those lows, but I think it's important for both of you to kind of understand where things are at and share the journey, right? The good and the bad. So yeah, definitely credit to you guys. And like you say, 12 or 13 years on, FTA, I would imagine, is probably in a pretty different place from the early days. But did you have any key challenges or anything like that since you started FTA?
To be honest, we were very naive at the beginning when we started it up. I thought it was going to be a lot easier than what it was, but it was a tough grind. We had to, as I keep saying to people and even potential sponsors that come on board with us, the one thing I've learned in the last 13 years is nothing sells itself. It was a long, hard grind to convince people to give us a go. But then once we got a bit of momentum, we started getting results and providing a really good service. And yeah, one thing led to another. But and you'd be able to relate to this too, Sam. I never did an MBA or anything like that in university, but I've definitely been to the University of Hard Knocks. What we've learned over those last 13 years, I don't think we could have learnt from a textbook. It's been challenging, but it's been incredibly rewarding as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. And there's always one thing after another, whether it's GFC or financial crisis or COVID or pandemics. There's always something, I feel like. So you just have to adapt and, get on with it, right? You guys have and I always say this too, you guys have a really, really good team in place nationally across the country. And I know, especially over the last sort of 6 to 12 months, you've done a fair bit of hiring and kind of growing the team. Are there any key milestones that kind of define that journey? Is it getting to that point where you've got a really solid team in place that can kind of, run a lot of the aspects of FTA for you, or anything else that might come to mind, I guess, from a milestone point of view?
A big turning point for us really was an unexpected one. And as you know, Sam Caroline actually had very bad health around about May last year. In fact, I won't go into the detail, but she spent 5 weeks in hospital, and it was a real eye-opener for us, and it made us think, where do we want to be in life? Where do we want to be in business? And we did a lot of soul-searching at that time, but we came to the conclusion that we want to live good, healthy lives. We want to keep going on to do bigger and better things, but FTA is a part of our future. We want to keep growing, and we want to keep building on what we've done. And we're not being driven, whether people believe this or not, by the financial dollar of it. We're in a comfortable position where we are. We want to grow FTA and keep reinvesting back into the business and to keep achieving what we're doing and get, like you said, Sam, we've got some really good people on board, and we want to keep growing that type of culture and really deliver a difference to the membership out there, the all-important trade sector. And it's amazing what we can achieve. I have pinch me moments almost on a daily basis. Again, yesterday I was one of a handful of people from industry represented to meet and be in front of the Minister for Home Affairs, Tony Burke, yesterday, and had an incredibly engaging and productive meeting. And I was just thinking, God, and this all came from a thought that we had in our lounge room 13 years ago to being where we are today.
Yeah. I was going to mention that actually. I see on LinkedIn all the updates, and I think lately you seem to be swanning around and meeting ministers and traveling interstate, which is awesome. Is a big part of what you're doing sort of advocating for various sort of policy changes, or I suppose those meetings with the likes of Tony Burke and other ministers, what are they kind of geared towards?
It's fantastic to be able to, like I said, even get an audience at a ministerial level. We don't always agree with the ministers. Ministers don't always take our recommendations forward, but at least we get the opportunity to be heard. There's a lot of criticism about politics and politicians, and maybe some of it's justified, but we still live in the most incredible country in the world. It's big enough to actually be quite strong, but it's still small enough where you can make a difference. And that's the thing that, again, coming back to the pinch me moments, that's something that my wife, Caroline, and I could dream up as a concept to, within a relatively short period of time, have such an influential seat at a table is incredible. The more you get exposure to these things and the more you realise what you don't know and how big the industry is. And like earlier in the week, had the privilege of being up in Brisbane meeting with the Minister for Agriculture at a round table there. There was about 50 representatives there. And that was just to see all the different sectors of our agriculture industry and their issues and their agendas. It was just, quite incredible just to be a part of it.
In those kind of rooms, obviously that was specific to the agriculture side of things, but are there any broader challenges, I guess, facing the logistics or freight industry as a whole, that you see and that keep coming up?
There's a whole lot of them. A lot of and I don't necessarily want to bore your listeners too much, but, there's a whole range of different cost issues that we're trying to deal with, whether it's, at the terminals, empty container parks or the like, or even government cost recovery charges themselves. We think they can be done better and fairer and more equitable and reward those that are highly compliant and the like. So there's a whole range of issues there. But some of the other issues which you'll be able to relate to is just staffing issues. We're in a very competitive market and trying to attract not just young people, just trying to attract people to the industry altogether to fill critical roles is something that we hear from the membership quite often.
It's definitely across the board. There's shortages in pretty much every fraction of logistics. And I mean, where do we start? Do we have to go into some of these higher education institutions and talk about some of the career paths, or, what's your take on it?
I think we've got to attack it at every level and use every resource available to us. It's a very small token towards achieving that. We set up a careers page recently, where we included, recruitment companies on there like yourself, but also those that are doing like the apprenticeship regimes, those that are sort of going out to the universities. And we want to make that available as a central point for people to be able to see what's there. But we need to push government as well, and that's where we come into it. Again, the government with this whole agenda around productivity is looking at human resources and the issues there, but they seem to be focused on areas which, again, are important, areas like renewables, areas like the building and trades, and not taking anything away from those sectors. They are vital and they are needed. But at the same time, so is logistics, because how do we get those materials to those people in the first place? We need to keep pushing the message with the government as well to provide funding too, and to provide marketing and advertising for this sector and to help us to increase the profile.
And on that, I guess, with the skills shortages, have there been any discussions with the government around some of the sponsorship opportunities for potentially overseas skilled workers that, are interested in coming to this country but might need a sponsorship visa, which is in my view, pretty limited in the freight forwarding and logistics space? But has there been any discussions around trying to, I guess, look at what's available or potentially look at new visa sponsorship options?
I think we need to look at the whole lot. And Sam, you're probably in a better position to comment about the technicalities of all of that. But I think the visa is definitely an area that we need to look at. But also, every element of the workforce has been well communicated through various different channels. We need to attract more women to the industry as well. We're still a very male-dominated industry, particularly in some of the sectors. Whether it's trucking and some of the more blue-collar type areas, which is understandable, I suppose, from the evolution. So much of the jobs now, we need to attract the best talent that's available, whether they be male, whether they be female, whether they be young, whether they be old. And we're not to rule out the old people as well, like, people like me, 60 plus. We can still do things. We need to embrace the whole available workforce.
Yeah. Absolutely. And on that, I mean, I just pulled up a report earlier because I know your background especially is kind of from that customs broker aspect, right? So I was just interested. I pulled up a bit of a report, and we've got 644 professionals on LinkedIn who are currently a customs broker. I know the number of licenses is a bit higher than that, but that also doesn't take into account people that are kind of retired or semi-retired and not really working. So it might be fairly accurate, maybe. And within that, we've got 36% female, 64% male, which is actually on the higher end in terms of the roles. When we look at other roles like sales, it's about 70%, I think, women and about 30% male. And like you say, trucking, I don't know, it's probably 90% if I had to guess, maybe 85. Where do you see the future, especially with the broker side? Because that's always a challenge, right? And as we know, that is a bit of an aging population and people are coming to retirement age. What's your view, particularly on the broker side?
It definitely is aging, and I can say this because I fit the criteria myself. But I look at our events, and I look out in the audience, and there's a lot of grey and balding heads in the audience, and that's no offence to any of you who may be listening to this, but it's a reality, and it's reflected in the stats. I think under the age of 30, there might have been less than 10 licensed brokers across the country, and even on another light-hearted note, we were looking at what's the next merchandise that we get for our CPD events next year. And Caitlin from our office here suggested we get little medicine pill boxes branded with FTA, which is a bit sad. But anyway, that's enough. That's enough of. We do need to attract young people. And look, again, I don't want to sound like a old has-been, but I will refer to the good old days. In the good old days when I did my customs broker studies back at Sydney TAFE, we had really good TAFE teachers at night, like really experienced and very good communicators and good teachers. The content was complex and I still didn't quite understand it at TAFE. But in that era, you had the luxury of having mentors in the workplace who, one, had time and two, had the experience and were more than willing to try and impart that on the next generation coming through. I know there are some businesses now that still do that. They find the time to actually nurture and develop people and give them the acquired experience that they need to complete their studies and get a license. They're very few and far between. And that's, again, due to the nature of business these days. Businesses are running lean. They've got to be high outputs, and they struggle to be able to nurture and develop the staff in-house. So for those few who are out there that do it and do it well, it's an absolute credit to you that you actually do it. But unfortunately, it's not on a scale to sustain the numbers that we need. So, we've got some serious questions to ask in the years ahead.
Yeah, looking ahead, are there like within freight forwarding, particularly freight forwarding, because I suppose that's the sort of area that we're doing a lot of work in currently at the moment, but what's your view on the skills that need to change, over the next few years, especially as AI really starts to gain a lot of momentum and other software and technologies? What skills do you think are going to be crucial to be successful?
It's a really good question, Sam. And AI is just, as we all know, is just mind-boggling, especially as we see more and more applications on how it can get used. I'm not bragging here, although I am proud. My son is a doctor, and I think he's my son. I think he was born with red hair. He looks a bit like Prince Harry, but Caroline assures me he's my son. I had a bit of a joke with him, and I said, "You're going to be redundant." I said, all you did is spend all those years at university just learning what, different symptoms might mean to come up with a conclusion of an illness. And I said, in the future, it'll all be replaced by a robot. You just go there, you'll get a pinprick, you'll get your blood test. It'll do a full analytics of what you've studied at uni, spit out the answer, and it'll give you a script, or it might even produce the medicines that you needed. Now, I said that just to rev him up, but it's probably not that far from the truth. And where does that leave other jobs in general? So I haven't answered your question. All I know is that AI is frightening how powerful it can be. And I think the thing will be, I don't think it will replace the roles completely that we've got in place now, but it will undoubtedly be a tool to help people do things quicker and better and maybe focus on the more value-added services that are out there. So, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's going to facilitate the need for humans to have more soft skills, to be able to engage with customers, to be able to, and that's maybe where, the differences will be, where we have to actually identify the human element again to value add to customer relationships.
Yeah, you're right. My view is that, look, AI is evolving exponentially, and I think that it's very important for people to get on board with it rather than be kind of scared and I understand some of the concerns, but you really have to just be on board and you have to utilize it because ultimately it's a tool to hopefully do your job more effectively. I don't necessarily believe it's just going to replace a whole bunch of jobs and we're all going to be jobless, I think it's just another tool, right, on top of other things like the internet. So it's one of those ones where you need to stay abreast and it's constantly changing. So that would be my little 2 cents, is to actually use it and don't ignore it. For newcomers, and we were talking about newcomers trying to attract people to the industry, are there any misconceptions or, for newcomers, what is something that no one really tells you about this industry that might be a bit of a surprise maybe to some of the younger listeners or people outside the industry?
Look, I think probably one of the real selling points is that it is a global industry and the skills that you can learn are transferable around the world. I'd encourage any young people that do come into the industry to try and diversify their experiences and skills within an organisation as much as possible. You don't want to get trapped into being one part of the business. I would encourage to try and understand as much as you can, and every experience that you do get along the way will stay with you for life and you'll be able to call on it at different stages. The more experience that you can get, the more valuable you become. And again, the problem-solving skills and the knowledge and the technical knowledge that you need for compliance, whether it's in relation to, dangerous goods, load and restraint, customs clearance and international freight forwarding, etc. It's all valuable skills, which again, to me, a big selling point for a lot of young people is that it's a transferable skill and something that is valued all around the world.
Yeah, that came up actually in the last episode we did. It's probably one of the few industries I think that is really transferable. If you're a lawyer, you can't necessarily just go and practice law in another country, right? If you're a doctor, same kind of thing. There's different regulations and there's different degrees and qualifications, where this industry, if you're in customer service, if you're in sales, you can go to the Middle East, you can go to Europe, you can go to America, pretty much anywhere, and essentially do the same job you were doing in a different country relatively easily in that sense. So I think that's a huge selling point for people, which is great. And, I guess looking forward, as we've got a few months left to 2025, heading into 2026, are you optimistic about, the future in general in this industry? Or if you had a crystal ball, what's your kind of feeling as we head into 2026 in a few months?
It's a challenging time. Again, challenging for a whole lot of different reasons. We've got, all the geopolitical issues, and we've got, increased tariffs and the like, and economies around the world stagnating a little as well. So it sounds a little bit negative, but it's the world that we face. And the other issue too is, we are seeing that the big are getting bigger. So, we're seeing massive freight forwarding companies swallowing up other freight forwarding companies. We're seeing shipping lines, vertical integration and purchasing freight forwarding companies as well. We've got stevedores doing transport and freight forwarding and customs clearance. So nobody's sticking to their knitting anymore. They're all looking to get down this vertical integration, all trying to get bigger and bigger. Where does that leave the small to medium-sized businesses? Maybe they can be nimble enough and strong enough and provide that customer service to stay relevant. I think it's going to be increasingly hard for the small companies to retain the really big clients that they may have today. But again, maybe the opportunity there is, as we were saying before, Sam, maybe the things like AI shouldn't be seen as a threat. Maybe that should be embraced as an opportunity for these businesses to keep overheads low and to be able to do more work. Maybe they'll be able to do more with less, with the type of tools that are coming, and remain profitable and grow. But it's, again, starting to sound like an old man, but like the first 40 years of my experience in this industry, we basically had more of the same. Like, yes, 40 odd years ago, we had manual paper manifests, and we had paper airway bills, and we had messages transferred by facsimiles and telexes. You wouldn't even know what a telex is, Sam, do you? Anyway,
I know what a fax machine is.
Okay. But essentially the processes were the same, albeit a lot of it was manual. Then we went to the first era of electronic systems, which basically just replaced the manual process. And then, as I said, when the ICS came in around the 2000s, the processes still stayed the same, but we did everything via the internet. I get the feeling now, the next decade, we're going to see real change for the first time. I think processes will start radically changing. Government agencies will be risk assessing in different ways, and industry will be processing freight in different ways. I think it's those that can embrace the change, take advantage of the change, will survive and prosper.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I spoke to a forwarder recently who actually is doing pretty much exactly what you said, where, they're a smaller forwarder, but they're actually doing a lot more with less in terms of embracing technology and AI. They're creating so much automation that their customers are loving it. They haven't necessarily had to increase the headcount substantially, but the hires that they have made have been really key strategic players, right? So I think for those smaller to mid-sized firms, that's the opportunity, especially as there's more and more consolidation in the market. So talking about next year, so August 2026 is a big month for you guys. So you've recently announced the Australian New Zealand Shipping and Logistics Conference, which is very exciting. Tell us about that and why you guys decided to launch that.
Well, first of all, I have to thank you and Fiona for being a sponsor of that event. So thank you for coming on board very early on the piece. And again, your ongoing support's appreciated. The event itself, so through the role that we have with the Australian Peak Shippers Association, their equivalent organisation in New Zealand is the New Zealand Cargo Owners Council. So representing a lot of the big exporters in particular, the likes of Zespri and Fonterra and those type of producers. So we're working very closely and have been with the council for many years. And we've been talking about this concept of a joint conference for many years as well. Now that we've got more resources on board, as we talked about earlier, we thought it's time that we do kick this off. The New Zealanders were very keen, and they were very keen for us to go first. So that's what we're doing. So the first event that we'll be doing, as you said, will be 27th, 28th of August next year in Sydney. We've already booked the Sheraton Grand at Hyde Park in Sydney, and we'll be doing a gala dinner at New South Wales Parliament House on the Thursday evening of that event as well. I think what will really separate this from other events is it'll bring the whole industry together, which again was our vision when we kicked off FTA. So we'll have major exporters, we'll have importers there, we'll have freight forwarding companies there, and many others. We'll have the whole logistics sector involved in the program and in the delegate numbers. So we're expecting a big turnout. And again, the beauty about doing this with our good friends in New Zealand is we don't have to organise a conference like this every year. We only have to do it every second year, and then the host country takes on the role to do it. So we kick it off next year, and then we'll progress from there on a rotating basis.
Exciting. And I think the events that FTA that you guys sort of run, Fiona and I can see firsthand, went to Tasmania a few months ago for the Shippers Forum, and, kind of going into some of these events, I always sometimes have these preconceptions that are, after lunch, I'll get a bit tired and I'll get a bit over it. But we really didn't. And I found it super engaging the entire time. And that was a really, really great event. And I think just a little taste of how you guys actually put together events and you do it in such a great way. So yeah, I've no doubt that next year is going to be huge. And people can purchase tickets now. Is that available or?
Yeah, we take cash. No,
Yeah.
we haven't got the website up and running yet. We're engaging a professional event organizer to help us with this event, and we'll be having a website up in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But those who are looking to sponsor, such as Logi Hire, are more than welcome to talk to us, and they'll get some branding straight away to kick off the event.
Yeah, perfect. All right, Paul. And as we start to close out, a question that I like to ask everyone who joins is, what was a mindset or a principle that helps you kind of stay grounded in this sometimes highly stressful and demanding industry that we're in? I think I know the answer, but let's go.
Well, I'll be interested what you think the answer is. Look, I think for me, I keep very much grounded by Caroline, to be honest. So
that was my answer.
It is, okay. I'm a bit of a media tart. I have enjoyed the media spotlight. going in front of the cameras I actually really enjoy. Meeting with the ministers and all of that and plugging it on social media, it's great. I've got Caroline who keeps me grounded. If I'm at home sitting on my mobile having a look, I've in the past she said, "What are you doing? Googling yourself again." Caroline keeps me grounded, and we enjoy the simple pleasures in life. To be honest, I really hate getting on a plane, whether it's interstate or overseas or whatever. To me, it doesn't do it for me. What we enjoy is hopping in our camper van and just enjoying a fire and a glass of wine and something to eat and just each other's company and doing the real simple pleasures. And even when we're traveling interstate, wherever possible, we try and hop in our little camper van and try and mix a bit of work and pleasure and just enjoy the simple things in life. I think sometimes we just overcomplicate life. It can be very simple and very nice, just enjoying the simple things.
Very well said. Paul, thank you so much. And for people that want to connect and find out more about FTA, what's the best way? LinkedIn? You're pretty active on LinkedIn?
Yeah, you can reach out to us on LinkedIn or our website, which is www.ftalliance.com.au.
Paul Zalai, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate your time and support as always, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
Yeah, thanks again, Sam.